last meeting of the Finance and Council Controlled Organisations Committee. At this stage there was no public forum, so there will not be one. We have apologies from the Mayor, from Councillor Steadman and from Councillor Newell. Could I have a seconder for them? Councillor Wilson, thank you. Just move that we accept the apologies. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? No, that's carried unanimously. Confirmation of the agenda. I'd just like to confirm the agenda within regards to Standing Order 21.1. We adopt option C be taken in relation to moving and seconding of motions. Seconder for that, Councillor Wilson again. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? That's also carried unanimously. Look, I'd just like to remind you too of your declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything they want to add or subtract? Councillor Vandervis.
Under due process, you can't claim a unanimous vote unless it's actually voted on individually. Okay, well, I'll say it was passed.
Thank you. Have you got any alteration to your agenda? No. To your declaration of interest?
No, all good.
Okay. Would you like to move that we second that?
Yes, quite.
Thank you, Councillor Vandis. Yes. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? It's passed. Now, I wonder if we've got someone to come and speak. Gavin or Richard, or both, come up. We're going to have item 5, which is the Waipori Fund quarter ending March. Richard, got anything you'd like to say?
Yes, the fund had a solid quarter for March, which has continued on in April. The fund was up about 4.7 million in the March quarter, and also approximately another 1 million in April. But happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? We've got 3 people. No questions at all. Okay. If no one's got anything. Councillor Vandervis.
Just so you can have a question. Sorry, it took me a little while to get to page 22, where it shows unemployment rates, and it shows Dunedin again significantly above.
22 will be item 6. You can have a question for the next one.
My one says item 5. My sincere apologies.
Sincere apologies.
I'll crawl back under a stone for you.
Crawl back under your rock. Okay, well, if that's the case, Councillor Hawkins has moved, Councillor Wilson has seconded. Any discussion?
Just to note that that's a really good performance.
Lee, some discussion?
Yeah, I'm just pleased to note that the fund still seems to be doing quite well despite what appears to be a bit of volatility. On the bottom of page 17 it shows benchmark and it shows Waipori. Am I reading that correctly to show that there has been some volatility but that Waipori has done pretty well despite that?
Yes, that's right. There was some volatility predominantly in the fourth quarter of 2018, which the fund has recovered solidly from, which is pleasing to see.
Thank you.
Also just refer you to the note there at the bottom of page 17, Councillor Vandervis, that the benchmarks are still not, you're not completely counting apples against apples all the time. They're just close enough, sort of the best average. Yep. Any other discussion? If that's the case, I'll put them. Well, right to reply, Councillor Hawkins. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's passed. Carried. Okay, item 6. Thank you, Richard. That's awesome. Mr. Logie, the financial result. Would you like to speak to that at all? Any comments to make?
No, just happy to take questions to the Chair.
Councillor Vandervis.
I note on the getting near the bottom of page 21 that total debt from last year was 198.9, and we're now looking at just a bit over 211, so like a $12 million increase in debt. I was wondering where in the debt profile between the DCC and DCHL does stadium debt sit? Does it sit in this lot or does it sit in the DCHL lot? It has been bounced around.
So just for clarification, so when the stadium review was done, one of the arrangements was that $30 million of debt transferred back to the DCC. So that sits as part of our debt. and then the remaining debt sits with Dunedin Stadium property.
Okay, so of this 211 million debt here, 30 of it is stadium and the rest is
Is DC.
DCHL.
The rest of the stadium debt sits in Dunedin
Okay.
Stadium property.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Councillor Wilson.
Just for clarity, and just checking that I'm understanding this, we're in a better debt position than we've budgeted, but we've spent more money on capital works. Is that, if I look at that chart on under note 2?
Yeah, that's correct. Primarily that's driven by a lot of the spend in excess of budget. Remembering that we adjusted the budget in October, it relates to the Peninsula project, which obviously attracts NZTA funding. It's fair to say once you get project funding approved from NZTA, the money comes through relatively quickly on invoice, so we're getting a fairly regular cash flow from NZTA to support those projects.
And the other question I had is, under the revenue line, we've got rates and we get grants, and the sort that you just talked about. And I'm just wondering whether that revenue line, because of the commentary afterwards, whether it should almost be separated out to rates and capital, rates and grants, to see where those lines are going. I know it's not what we've done in the past, but it seems it would make for easier reading.
So if you just go to page 26 where we have the detailed, then we obviously spell it out there. So that spells out the rates revenue, obviously the operating revenue. We have our grants, our contributions, which is a DC. So we do it there. The idea of that first table is really just a high level. This is the high level picture.
Councillor van der Vis.
Thank you. On page 29, we've got details of capital expenditure, and I'm looking at the transportation line, which last year actual was just over 12 million, but is now 35.5 million, tracking to 45. The increase, the dramatic increase in transportation capital spend, is that mainly down to the Peninsula Cycleway, or has there been another major contributor for this very large increase in transportation spend?
So the increase, so the increase is obviously slightly ahead of the revised budget, or the budget for this year. In terms of the spend, there's $14 million has gone on the Peninsula project, $4 million on the urban cycleways, and then $16 million on renewals.
Okay, so we're looking about 20 odd million for the cycleways, and then 12 million renewals on top
Point
of
of
that.
order. Sorry, they're not cycleways. It's a road widening safety issue, the Peninsula project. It is not a cycleway project.
Point of order.
Hang on, I'll answer this one.
I'm in the middle of asking a question.
Yep, just hang on. So look, I don't think that's a point of order. I think it is misleading the way it's said. So I will rule that the Peninsula Road is not just a cycleway, Councillor van der Vis. It has been about raising the road for sea level and making it safer. So
With respect, Chair, did I ever say it was just a cycleway?
No, you said 20 million was spent on cycleways, or you said approximately 20 million. So I think the implication was that it was mainly spent on cycleways, and I think that the question was answered. There was 5 million on the urban cycleways, and there was 14 million on the Peninsula Road, which is, if I was going to say, maybe a third would be cycleways and 2/3 might be safety and road raising. So
I note the extreme sensitivity about the words peninsula connection, peninsula widening, but no mention of peninsula cycleway in any of our paperwork. Moving on to my other question, on page 27, we have short-term borrowings, which we didn't have last year, of $10.5 million. Can you just roughly tell me what that new short-term borrowings has been for?
So effectively during the year we borrow money depending on the cash flow associated primarily with the rates instalments. So depending on when a rates instalment sits, if it sits on either side of the 31st of March, so if it sits on prior to the 31st of March, then we obviously get the money and don't have to borrow it. But if it comes in on the 4th of April, then obviously we have to borrow at the end of March, which then gets paid back when we get that money in for the rates. So because the rates is quite lumpy, in terms of the quarterly payments, then obviously that does affect the timing of when we borrow money. However, as indicated in the 10-year plan, at the end of this year, we will have a net increase in our borrowings, which has been indicated when we did the 10-year plan.
Right, but I mean, there was no short-term borrowing last year. My question was, what has this short-term borrowing been particularly for? Is it because we spent more on capital works and therefore the rates wasn't quite enough to cover it, or is it simply a timing issue?
It's a combination of both. So
Okay.
yes, we are spending more money, but also it can be a timing issue around when the rates come in.
Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Logie. Just to your graphs on page 25, and in particular on the bottom left, on year-to-date capital expenditure, and how remarkable it is 9 months into the year to not just be on track but ahead of schedule with capital. And I realise that this is a report on a period being rather than a forecast of what's to come, but I'd be interested if you had any comment as to where you anticipated that would end up for the financial year at this point.
Given that primarily the reason for the difference between the green line and the red line is we made a purchase of a property in South Dunedin, so that's effectively affected that. In terms of where we'll end up, we'll probably end up, if you ask me, maybe 95 million, potentially, so it's just slightly over the revised budget, remembering that the original budget for this year was $69 million.
Thank you.
Councillor Geary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On page 37, under transport, I have a question regarding I'm going to use the old name, Portobello Road, Harrington Point Road Safety Improvement Project, also known as the Road Widening Project, also known more recently as Peninsula Connection. I see that's the primary driver for the overspend. That's been covered. I have a question about the early delivery. Presumably that's somewhat affected by weather and so forth, but is there a deadline or a limit on when the funds have to be spent according to NZTA? You talked about the money coming in quite quickly. Are there any other parameters around the money?
No.
Okay, if we're going to move it for that report. Oh, sorry, Councillor Vandervis, sorry, another question, sorry.
On page 34, transportation revenue was favourable 123k, mainly due to greater than expected corridor access way revenue. Can you let me know what corridor access way revenue was?
I'll have to come back and actually clarify exactly what that term means. So I'll send an email out saying what that actually means. Unless do you know, Councillor Hall?
My suspicion was that it was double speak for one-way cycleway, but I just wanted that confirmed publicly. Nobody knows? Okay, never mind. Moving on, just a couple of lines below, investment account revenue was favourable 600k due to the unbudgeted waterfront grant from the Provincial Growth Fund. My understanding was that the Provincial Growth Fund grant was for 800k, not for 600. Is there a discrepancy there, or was the 200 coming from somewhere else?
No, the 200's yet to come.
Okay, so we've
So
done the work.
The 600 was a progress payment, and then there'll be a subsequent payment.
Thank you for explaining that. That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gavin, really when we look at these financials, most of it was around capital expenditure and investment in the city, whether it's the infrastructure, the road widening project, or the purchase of the South Dunedin hub. Would I be correct in assuming that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Elder.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the graph on page 25, year-to-date capital expenditure, and the line from 2018 well below the budget, and the line for 2019 tracking on or just above. My question is this a good indication that actually we're getting the work done that we need to be getting done?
means that the work that we're doing is in line with what was proposed in the 10-year plan, obviously subject to the fact that Council approved that additional expenditure in October. If you go to page 29, you can see the, I've actually provided a last year-to-date actual, just as a comparison, so you can see where that additional spend is. Some of it's obviously in property, parks, which will include the Logan Park development, and then you've got obviously transport and 3 waters. So that is a column there.
Okay, I'm willing to move this report from the Chair if there's no more questions. Councillor Hawkins is happy to second it. We're now in debate. Any discussion? Anyone want to speak to it? Well, I would just make the comment, looking at that graph on page 29, I think there's some important things there. Certainly the fact that we've committed to a much greater capital spend and we're achieving it. I think that's a fantastic outcome. I think the bottom line, 3 waters, last year, year to date, year to date, they spent $8 million. This year we've already spent 13 and we'd budgeted to spend 10.8, so we're already ahead in that area. Roading we've already discussed, but there's a number of areas which have led to a capital spend of $69 million and Mr Logie has said that year to date the expectation to the end of the year could be a full $95 million, which I think is an outstanding result. So it's not just finance staff, but it's right across the organisation we're spending, and it's very good. Councillor Geary.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just wanted to add this was an excellent result, and for the community in which I live, the fact that we have spent the money on the Peninsula Widening Project, the Peninsula Connection, and we have delivered the project early is greatly welcomed. And so that's a very positive aspect of spending money. Spending money is not necessarily a negative thing. In this particular regard, it has kept our community safe, and the delivery of that project will continue to do so.
Councillor Elder.
Thank you, Chair. I know you got a wee fright when it was 4-point-something million on the South Dunedin hub, but I think that was money well spent, and South Dunedin is very appreciative of that spend.
There being no other speakers, I will put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's passed. Thank you. Swap seats and we can... Oh, items for consideration for the Chair. Has anyone got anything that they want to consider in the future? There's none. I will close the meeting at 1:17. Exactly when Mr Benson Pope predicted it would close. Thank you.